Now I request our second speaker. Please welcome Professor Marzenna Jakubczak. I'll invite her. She is Pedagogical University, Cracow, Poland, Professor of Philo. Now we will listen to her. Please give a big hand.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk about the agency in the context of classical Samkhya and yoga philosophy. So it's in a way narrow, but on the other hand, it can be also extrapolated, I hope, much wider. The problem of psychophysical agency provokes numerous questions. Here I'm going to focus only on some basic issues to expose the view of Samkhya and yoga, two closely related philosophical schools emerged in ancient India. The questions to be considered in the context of these two classical Hindu darshanas are as follows. What is action in terms of Samkhya Karika and Yoga Sutra? Whose action is it? Or what makes one an agent? What is a right act and morally good action according to Samkhya and Yoga? And how free is our will? When seeking the answers to these questions, I argue that agency, as it is conceptualized by philosophical tradition, being the subject matter of this paper, should not be identified with personhood or selfhood. Neither it ought to be motivated by the expected results of one's actions. My claim is that what challenges the Samkhya Yoga philosophical perspective on action is empowering agency by revealing the agent's determinants and by imprinting the agent's... So my claim, once again, sorry for interruption, is that the focus of Samkhya and Yoga is empowering agency and also some kind of imprinting is what is the focus of these philosophical perspectives. Imprinting in agent's mind the right perceptual modes and behavioral procedures. These right modes and procedures are to prevent the self from being identified with ego or current doer, and to liberate the self from the illusionary engagement in so-called voluntary action. Before I focus on Samkhya and Yoga, let me first refer to some basic distinctions made in the contemporary philosophy of mind. It will be helpful in situating the Indian view and will allow us to capture the specificity specificity of Samkhya and Yoga view in contrast to the popular Western conceptualization. A central question in the philosophy of action in contemporary Western view is what distinguishes human actions from events or doings in general. A standard answer to this inquiry appeals to a casual theory of action. Genuine actions or deeds are said to be deliberately done or undertaken to bring about some change in the world. They are events with a distinctive internal cause, such as intention, volition, belief, or desire. Whereas other events that merely happen to us, such as raining, sweeping down, or snoring, do not fall into the category of action because they are not caused by suitable intentions or desires of the agents. When we look closer to the concept of action as it is exposed in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and in Samkhya Karika of Ishvara Krishna, we can find no clear distinction between human intentional doings. So we can find no clear distinction between human intentional doings and events that merely happen. But instead, we come across quite a different categorization, indicating a variant approach. The fundamental category in this context is transformation, parinama, covering both the human actions and all worldly events or happenings in general. Samkhya Yoga tradition develops the doctrine of world-nature transformation as the unified conception of change and grounds it in a general assumption that there is no essential or ontological difference between these two kinds of doings, because both human actions and any worldly events undergo the same kind of natural triguna conditioning. In his commentary to Yoga Sutra, Vyasa claims that every change is in fact nothing but transformation of qualities, dharmas, which are always inherent in substratum of qualities, dharmin, both in the knowable and the knower, and does not affect the substance, dravya itself. The change of dharmas may be threefold. One, it can stand for succession of essential qualities of a substance, dharma parinama. Second, it can refer to the sequence of the temporal qualities within a particular owner of the properties, dharmin, lakshana parinama. And three, it can also mean the change of state of intensity of the present quality, avastha parinama. Thus, every change, including human intentional doing, results in the change of properties, dharmas, which are modified only in the sense of changing their mode of existence, bhava. What is more, every change, according to Ishvara Krishna, undergoes the universal principle of causation called satkarya, where the effect is inherent in the cause, and it exists even before the causal operation. In other words, action brings to existence what has potentially existed since ever, and not only after the particular agent came about to desire something or even came into actual being. Therefore, no action can result in something what is of different essence as its cause, because action is only to transform the unmanifest, avyakta, into the manifest, vyakta. However, this very broad sense of activity or doing as a pervasive change, parinama, being just the manifestation of a thing's previously latent properties, including, for example, involuntary falling a stone to the river, as well as my intentional throwing a stone at a person, is definitely not sufficient when it comes to discussion on the moral issues. This kind of agency, kartritva, implying a capacity for reflection and choice, brings an additional context to the causal relationship, which is in all the classical schools of Indian philosophy, both Hindu, Buddhist, and Jaina, captured by the notion of karma. And I'm not going to develop this further, of course, at this point. I'm going to focus on the question, who is the agent now? What seems necessary for the agent is the entity being capable of action which undergoes normative evaluation and is assessed as correct or incorrect, good or wrong, is the capacity to act voluntarily and take responsibility for one's deeds. As far as volition is concerned, yoga thinkers argue that any voluntary act or conscious intention when translated into action, turns immediately into involuntary factor of the future action, being recorded as a latent impression, samskara, and then arises spontaneously as thoughts or fluctuations of mind, chitta vritti, to give an impulse to another desire, intention, and then action, which will be inevitably preserved as a subsequent samskara of the same kind to become an impulse of, and so forth and so on. This is how Patanjali explains inescapable limitation of agency caused by the constant interaction between the conscious and voluntary acts on the one hand, and the subconscious inclinations, habitual behaviors, instinctive or automatic activities on the other hand. In the light of the conception of mutual conditioning between the actual doings and their latent imprints, which stands for, at the same time, a cause of effect and a cause and effect of one's volitions, the concept of free will seems rather thin, because even the most intimate desires, raga, and aversions, dvesha, are virtually conditioned, if not determined, by our previous actions, bringing fruits in the form of seemingly spontaneous wishes motivating our action. We should not overemphasize the sovereignty of volition in describing the nature of agency. In our will can hardly be considered free as long as our voluntary choice and the active decision is determined by the latent trace of our previous actions, samskaras, in the form of our likings, aversions, desires, fears, perceptual and behavioral attitudes, etc. In other words, will is never fully or really free before one can be liberated from the karmic inheritance of the past deeds. And this may only be achieved by eradicating of ignorance, avidya, about the ultimate nature of reality, including the mechanism of human agency. This liberation from the past determinants of our own activity is identified by the Samkhya and Yoga thinkers with the final spiritual goal called kaivalya, that is oneness, the perfect isolation or emancipation, which implies detachment from all samskaric involvement and the natural trigunic conditioning. Having achieved this purpose, no fruit of action is desired by the agent anymore. Therefore, what seems more important is to figure out why I actually wish what I wish, rather than how to achieve what I want. And because time is nearly consumed, right? I would like to just to read the conclusion, which is not fully supported by the arguments due to the time limit. Anyway, what challenges the Samkhya Yoga philosophy of action is empowering of agency by displaying the agent's determinants and by imprinting in the agent's mind the right perceptual and behavioral procedures, which prevent the self, purusha or chit, from being identified with the ego, aham or chitta, or current doer, and from engaging oneself in ownership of voluntary action. However, the key problem seems to arise right here. How should such a right action be accomplished, since there are two opposite tendencies within a human being? This dilemma is solved by subordination of action to insightful perception. Both classical darshanas, Samkhya and Yoga, recognize a strict correlation between liberation and true knowledge. The knowledge of the inner subjective conditioning, including the subconscious latent factors or motivators, rather than the external circumstances or doings. Only having captured the mechanism of self-conditioning by own actions, one can start modifying the burdensome nature of doing. The crucial task is to decondition one's action or to transform its causal chains so that the agent may shift to a different perceptual procedure, thanks to the meditative mode of consciousness, and in consequence to endure in the right behavioral procedure based on the non-egotist perspective. Those, yes, I know, last sentence. Though this is the empirical ego, aham, who is the agent till ignorance is ultimately overcome. Its action should become less and less focused on minus, mamakara, of one's will, but instead, so to say, more automatic or ritual-like. We could also call such a satisfactory right action ignorance and doubt-free of, or ego-lessly, spontaneous, effortless, and dispensable. So this is the perspective of these two classical schools that I very, very briefly underlined here. Sorry for these shortcuts. I hope that maybe in questions or comments we can develop some points a bit in depth. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We were listening to Professor Marzenna Jakubczak, Professor of Philosophy, Pedagogical University, Cracow, Poland. And sometimes when on the spot we have to edit a script, we might have missed something very important. But hope you will excuse us.